Thank you, Tom, and good evening and welcome to Sempra headquarters. Going to focus a little bit about the Bay Delta, a little bit of background to build on the remarks earlier by Deputy Secretary, Deputy Director Helliker, and on Tom's remarks. A little bit about the Bay Delta. It is the source for two major imported water systems in California. The one we've been talking the most about tonight is the State Water Project, but it was first the source for a similar project called the Central Valley Project that was built by the federal government and serves primarily agricultural and some urban customers in Central Valley and other parts of California. The Central Valley Project, the federal system, was built in the 1930s. It provides flood control, navigation, and water delivery for those customers. Big facilities as part of the Central Valley Project include Shasta Dam, Friant Dam, the Delta Mendota Canal, the Cross Canal, and the Delta Cross Channel. It is also the source of the State Water Project system. The Feather River Project was enacted in 1951. It was ratified by the voters of the state of California in an election in November of 1960. Under the Burns-Porter Act, $1.5 billion of bonds were issued to pay for those facilities, and the bonds are being paid back by the water contractors and the water customers, including us in San Diego, to pay back the cost of those facilities and as well as the maintenance and operation. The key facilities in the State Water Project include the Oroville Dam, the California Aqueduct, 500 miles of aqueduct, 500 miles of aqueduct that bring the water down from the Bay Delta all the way down to Southern California and connect into the Metropolitan Water District facilities in the northern part of the Met service area. The State Water Project serves the North and South Bay Area, San Joaquin Valley, as well as Southern California. For us here in San Diego, the source of our Bay Delta water is primarily the Metropolitan Water District and the water that the Water Authority purchases from MWD. MWD is the cornerstone of the State Water Project system, representing about half of the water supply contract on the State Water Project system and paying about 50% of all the costs on the State Water Project system. The Water Authority, in turn, takes delivery of that water from the Metropolitan and delivers it to our 24-member retail agencies and cities that serve the water to the retail customers here in San Diego. Again, about 25% over the last 10 years or so, average of our water supplies in San Diego originate in the Bay Delta. The State Water Project, the state of California, the people of California own and operate the State Water Project system. It delivers that water down into the Metropolitan Water District system, and in turn, Metropolitan delivers that to our pipelines and other facilities here in San Diego County, and us in turn to our 24 agencies. So that's the path and the pattern of Bay Delta water to us here in San Diego County. As was mentioned earlier, the big issues in the Bay Delta involve a lot of threatened and endangered species that are limiting the operations of the State Water Project and the ability to move that water supply contract, that contracted water that we're paying for, that Metropolitan and in turn our ratepayers have been paying for since deliveries began in the late 1960s. Up here on the screen are just a few of those species, the ones that have really been the centerpiece and focus of these pumping restrictions in the Bay Delta. And what do they restrict? Well, they restrict operations in the Delta, particularly at that facility at the bottom center there. This is the main initial pumping plant for the State Water Project system, the Harvey O. Banks pumping plant. And it also restricts pumping operations at the Central Valley Project federal pumping plant just a short distance away. The Water Authority has, of course, with this amount of our water supply at stake, long and strong support for fixing the ecological and water supply reliability problems in the Bay Delta. The Water Authority was a strong supporter of the historic package of legislation passed in a special session of the California Legislature in November of 2009. We had 11 of our state legislators here in San Diego County who were critical to providing every single last vote necessary to pass each of the bills in that historic package of legislation. The Water Authority has not endorsed a specific project, a specific conveyance project, because we do not yet, and we are awaiting the release of the information and data we need and assurances that we'll need to see in order to make a business decision about what is the best project for us here in San Diego from water supply reliability as well as a cost-benefit standpoint. The key question that still remains unanswered is what do we get for many billions of dollars of investment in a Bay Delta project? What is the BDCP? It is a planning process and a permitting process designed to implement the state's goals of habitat restoration and water supply restoration of water supply reliability out of the Bay Delta. In early 2012, the Natural Resources Agency proposed as its primary focus a twin tunnel project capable of carrying 15,000 cubic feet of water per second through the facility. By the spring of last year, the fisheries agencies, the agencies required to provide permits to operate the facilities, issued what are called red flag memos, strongly indicating that such a large facility may not, in fact, be permittable by the agencies on a going forward basis. The fisheries agency suggested a smaller facility, perhaps a 9,000 CFS facility as described earlier, could be permitted, and they also suggested a process, long-term process to determine what amount of water supply we could reliably depend upon out of such a facility, and it was dubbed the decision tree. On July 25th, as Tom Warner mentioned, the Governor and Secretary of the Interior Salazar announced that they would, in fact, pursue a smaller facility, smaller than the original 15,000 CFS project of 9,000 CFS. Still a very large facility, twin tunnel project, capable of carrying that amount of water. The state and federal project contractors are paying the cost of the planning process, the BDCP process. That's nearly $250 million to bring the planning and this process up to the adoption of the environmental documents, the approval of the environmental documents necessary to hopefully obtain the permits to operate the facilities. The cost of the proposed project, the 9,000 CFS project, is $14 billion and perhaps more. The key to us here so far is we don't know what we'll get for that $14 billion. The decision tree process is a process where you will spend the money, build the project, and operate for a period of time before you have assurances of what amount of water supply you'll get from that investment. And that's causing concern not just to us in San Diego, but to other contractors who are helping to pay the process, to pay the bills in this planning process. They want, and frankly we agree, need assurances for what amount of water we'll get for that sizable investment. Why does that matter to us in San Diego, not only from a water supply reliability standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint? This graphic is instructive about where the money is coming to not only fund the planning of this project, but where the money is expected to come from to actually build and over a long period of time pay for the project. Roughly, the proposal is that the Central Valley projectors would pay about half of the cost, and the state water project contractors, again, of which Metropolitan is the largest, would pay the other half. So when you carve out to the right there the state water project contractors, Metropolitan Water District is the largest of those 29 contractors and represents about 50% of both the water supply and the costs associated with the state water project contract. The other 28 contractors comprise the other half, and one of those is the Kern County Water Agency, which represents 1/4 of the total project. So between two contractors, Metropolitan and the Kern County Water Agency, they represent 75% of the water supply and the costs associated with the Bay Delta. How does that translate to us here in San Diego? Well, if Metropolitan is paying about 1/4 overall the cost of the Bay Delta project, ratepayers in San Diego represent about 1/4 of Metropolitan's costs. We pay about 1/4 of Metropolitan's costs from year to year. And so we have a huge financial stake in the decisions being made about what will be built in the Bay Delta and how that will be paid for and who is prepared to commit long term to pay for those costs in the Bay Delta. Within the agencies, the 24 agencies of the Water Authority, you can see in that pie chart in the center, the city of San Diego, in turn, just as an example, is about 40% of the Water Authority's costs. So for those of you who are in San Diego, in the city of San Diego, that's a big bill. It's a big amount of the money statewide that's going to pay for solutions in the Bay Delta. So what are the Water Authority's concerns associated with that financing? Well, first, to understand how Metropolitan pays its bills. And Metropolitan is heavily reliant on the sale of water, the sale of the commodity, to raise revenues that it uses to pay its fixed obligations. It has very low, very few fixed sources of revenues, so it's heavily reliant on the variable sales of water. In fact, relies on water sales for more than 80% of its revenues year in and year out. Its water sales, like the water authorities and similar to our local agencies, are down significantly over the last 5 or 6 years, down 30%, and are projected to be sustained lower sales, far lower sales long term than had been projected in earlier water supply forecasts from Metropolitan. That has had a profound impact on water rates throughout the Met service area, in particular here in San Diego. If you are selling fewer and fewer units of water and you have all of the same and growing fixed costs, you're spreading those fixed costs over fewer and fewer water sales. What is that doing to the cost of each unit of water? Well, it's rising them sharply. In fact, Metropolitan, between 2006 and the rates that it's adopted through 2014, has doubled the treated water rate to us here in San Diego County. The Water Authority, just like the Water Authority, is diversifying our supplies and reducing our reliance on purchases of water from the Metropolitan Water District. Metropolitan's other 25 member agencies are making similar investments in their local areas to also reduce their reliance on Metropolitan. As Tom mentioned, we're very concerned about Metropolitan's long-term fiscal sustainability and the ability to pay not only for new facilities in the Delta, but its existing obligations, which are significant. What are those local water supply plans in Southern California? This is a graphic that shows graphically the local water supply plans of the 26 member agencies within the Metropolitan that comprise the Metropolitan Water District. These projects on this list on the next page are pulled right out of their 2010 urban water management plans, the official long-term water supply plans we are all required to file with the state of California every 5 years, in years that end in 0 and 5. And these are what the member agencies of Metropolitan are saying are their local water supply development plans between 2010 and 2035. Those plans in total add up to about 1.2 million acre feet of water that is being proposed or considered to be developed at the local level to reduce reliance and dependence on imported water supplies, both from the Colorado River and the Bay Delta. Of that 1.2 million acre feet, 415,000 acre feet are in their plans, their immediate near-term plans to begin implementation. Another 800,000 are potential projects that they have identified that might be built in that time period between now and 2035. Of those 1.2 million acre feet of projects is very critical to informing what Metropolitan will be selling in the future to those member agencies. But of that 1.2 million acre feet of water, Metropolitan, in its own 2010 urban water management plan, has only factored in 103,000 acre feet out of 1.2 million acre feet. Now, will all of these projects be built? No, likely not. But many of them will, and certainly more than 103,000 acre feet in our view. And as an example of projects that Metropolitan does not believe will be built in San Diego, but will instead be a demand on water from Metropolitan, and in turn a water demand on the Bay Delta, is the Carlsbad Seawater Desalination Project, now under construction in Carlsbad. That's 56,000 acre feet of water per year that beginning in 2016 will be developed and produced locally that won't be a demand on Metropolitan Water District or in turn on the Bay Delta. We think this reality of local supply development is a critical piece that should be informing the sizing, the scope, and the cost, and who's going to pay for those costs in the Bay Delta fix, and we've been advocating that now for several years. What is Metropolitan's current costs in the Bay Delta? This year alone, about $640 million in cost to Metropolitan. The vast majority of those are fixed costs year in, year out, no matter how much or how little water Metropolitan takes from the Bay Delta in a given year. And to San Diego, because of the Metropolitan rate structure, the way Metropolitan pays for those water supply costs is they have burdened the transportation charge they charge their member agencies and us for moving water supplies, not just water supplies we buy from Metropolitan, but our independent water supplies that we move through Metropolitan's facilities. This is a matter of dispute in court between the Water Authority and Metropolitan. The Water Authority has sued Metropolitan over this cost allocation or misallocation in the metropolitan rate structure that is costing ratepayers in San Diego this year $57 million that we dispute are overcharges to our ratepayers here in San Diego County. Why is that important to the Bay Delta fix? And what we're discussing today is because Metropolitan has told us that they plan to pay the new billions of dollars in costs in the Bay Delta through that exact same cost allocation system that has been disadvantaging us here in San Diego and is the focus of the current court dispute with Metropolitan Water District. We have advocated long at Metropolitan that it obtain firm financial commitments from all of its member agencies to back up Metropolitan's commitment to the state of California, that it has a fixed take-or-pay contract, an obligation, a fixed obligation each year to pay the state of California to pay back those existing bonds on the State Water Project, and presumably will have a take-or-pay or a fixed obligation to pay the additional costs on the State Water Project system. It may surprise some people in this room that while Metropolitan is obligated to pay those hundreds of millions of dollars a year in cost to the state of California, none of its member agencies are obligated to buy any water from Metropolitan. If water sales are more than 80% of your revenues year in and year out, and your 26 member agencies are not obligated to buy any water from you, how are you going to pay for the Bay Delta fix? The fix that we need. It's a critical question, and a question that has not been answered either by Metropolitan or in the BDCP process. Metropolitan simply says we're one rate increase away from paying for the Bay Delta fix. Well, sure, one rate increase, what's the size of that rate increase? Who's paying it? Is it being equitably allocated? Are MET's member agencies being obligated to back up a long-term contract that could go 30 or 50 years in duration? Metropolitan General Manager Jeff Keitlinger was asked that question, should Metropolitan get long-term contracts with its member agencies to back up its obligations, its long-term contract and fixed commitments to the state of California, in a forum here in San Diego a few years ago when Metropolitan was putting the finishing touches on its 2010 Integrated Resources Plan. Asked that question, Metropolitan's General Manager said, to date, most of our board members have said, we're not so sure about that. And most of our member agencies have said, no, thanks, but no thanks, because we prefer it the way it is. Should people make those firm commitments going into the future? So far, the member agencies have opted not to. They prefer it the way it is. Well, this is a huge risk for Metropolitan, and for those of us in San Diego who plan, as the 2020 pie chart show, we plan to buy significant supplies from Metropolitan despite our diversification. It's a significant issue to us if we're the last agency buying a significant amount of water from Metropolitan with the other agencies unwilling to make those kind of commitments. So on January 16th, the Water Authority joined a number of other large urban water agencies in California representing about 8 million California water customers, as well as other business and environmental and other stakeholders, in asking the BDCP to do one thing, to thoroughly analyze the Bay Delta alternative approach, this portfolio approach, in equal measure to the other alternatives being studied in the BDCP. We think it represents potentially a rational, reasonable approach to addressing the issues in the Delta. It recognizes that money is not unlimited, that the ratepayers' tolerance for rate increases is not unlimited, that we may not be able to do everything, the biggest of everything, and that we need to make our investment choices wisely, and ones that we can be proud to leave to future generations who will be burdened with paying those costs back and hopefully benefiting from an improved water supply reliability. So we've asked that alternative that you're going to hear from Barry Nelson momentarily about be thoroughly analyzed and evaluated in a cost-benefit analysis. That letter was sent a little over a month ago. We have not received a response from California Natural Resources Agency or the federal government. We hope to get a response back that says what the BDCP would be willing to do and plans to do to thoughtfully consider what you're about to hear from Barry Nelson.